All right, so last time we ended on completing the example homework, and today I want to go through the submission process so that we all know how homework is submitted and what will be required of homework. So if you look at the class webpage, we had module 0 homework, a PDF and a tarball. I have module 1 homework posted now. So module 1 homework is going to be due next Friday. Right, so that'll be the first homework assignment you do on your own. And what we did was we downloaded the module tarball and we looked at the module instructions, which are in this PDF. And so we did these 4 tasks. All right, so to complete the homework, what we're going to do is log into Blackboard. So if you haven't already logged into Blackboard, let's do that. We're going to do the quiz. I'm not sure if I can remember what the answers to the quiz were, but you get 3 attempts, so if we don't get 100%, you can take it again.
Okay.
Well, I think Doran wrote down all of the answers, didn't you, Doran? Okay.
I've lost a lot of my books.
Okay. All right, so this is scientific computing and productivity. All right, so in the homework section, this is where the links for the quizzes and the upload for uploading the tarballs is going to be. So we're going to do homework 0. I've already got it filled up with a bunch of different homeworks, right? So as the number that you need to be completing here is going to correspond to the number on the assignment that we did. So we did assignment 0 last time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the homework quiz. So I click on, that's the wrong one. Don't click on that. Click on homework quiz 0. Get some instructions. Looks like we have a 2-hour time limit. That should be plenty, right? You're going to do the homework before you take this quiz. You're going to have all of the answers. A couple of the questions are going to ask you things about like commands that would do the task that you were assigned. So you might have to spend a little bit of time thinking about how to do, would these commands work to do what it was I was supposed to do. So I'm going to click on begin. All right, so all of these quizzes should be set up like this. If they're not, let me know, right, and I'll try to fix it. But I've got them set up so that all of the questions are presented at the same time. This is different than I do like my physics classes, for example. Now, you need to be careful when doing this because if all of the questions are presented at the same time, they do not automatically get saved. So every time you put in an answer, you should save the quiz in case you get disconnected so that you can come back and complete it without having to enter all of the stuff again, right? So I have these all presented at the same time, but that means that you're responsible for saving. When I present one at a time, anytime you go to the next question, it automatically gets saved. That's why I usually do that. But for this one, I wanted to give you all of the questions at the same time. So let's look at what these questions would look like. So the first question is for problem number 1, which of the following commands would put you into the directory? Choose all that would work. So let's go back to the PDF and remember what the first problem was. It says the sandbox directory contains a directory named config. Go into this directory. All right, so that's going to be the cd command. And if I look at this first question, it says which of the following would put me into the directory and choose all that would work. So one thing that you're going to notice is that these quiz questions do not have, by themselves, they're not going to make sense, right? The context is the homework assignment. You're going to need to have the homework assignment with you to complete these quizzes. All right, so cd config / that would work. Cd config, right? Config's the name of the directory. I don't have to put the / on there, so that would work. rm config, that would try to remove that directory and fail because it's a directory, so I don't want to do that. And ls config, that would just list the contents of config. So these top 2 are the correct answers. All right. Oh wow, looks like maybe it automatically saved. All right, good. So maybe you don't have to worry about saving each time. All right, second question. For problem 1A, how many files are there? So if I go back to the homework set, 1A, how many files are in this directory? So I listed out the contents. There were some files, some directories. I just counted how many files there were and how many directories there were. How many files were there?
4.
4. So I'm going to hit enter here.
I've only worked from there, so
I'm going to click save answer. All right, so I've done the first 2. Next one, 1B, how many directories are there? 2 directories. Save my answer. Question 4. In 1C, which of the following command, or commands I should say, could be used to determine the number of files? Choose all that would work. So let's look and see what 1C was. 1C says that this directory contains a subdirectory named physical quantities. Determine how many files are in the subdirectory without going into the directory. So we know that we could cd into that directory and then type ls. That would list out the contents, but I want you to do this without going into it. So which commands would allow us to do that? Well, ls-tac-l is not going to give us the contents of the physical constants directory. It'll give us the contents of the current directory, so that's not one. ls-tac-l physical quantities, that's the directory we want. I've got ls-tac-l / physical quantities. Remember, / refers to the current directory, so that's just another way of saying in this directory there's a subdirectory named physical quantities, so that would also work. And of course, if you have a terminal open while you're doing this quiz, you can just check to see which one of these work, right? That's perfectly fine. ls-tac-l config, that's not going to work. ls-tac-l / config / physical quantities. Now remember, we're in the config directory at this point, right? And so what does .. mean?
It'll take you back.
It means the directory above. So even though this isn't a very, exactly, not a very efficient way of doing it, the relative path is go up a directory, go into the config directory, then go into the physical quantities directory. That would work too, right? So this is a perfectly acceptable command. Exactly. Your terminal needs to have something to do. All right. Question 1C, how many files were there? So how many files were in the physical quantities directory? 3 files, says Dinkle Star. Dinkle Little Star, sorry. And then question 6 is, from problem number 1D, which of the following commands would remove the directory? Choose all that would work. So 1D, remove the models directory. So there's supposed to be a directory named models. How would we remove it? There's the way that you removed it, and then there's the other, sometimes hundreds of ways that you could choose to remove it, especially if we start looking at all possible relative paths that we could give, .. / right? So we want to look at these and see if these will work. So hopefully you didn't open up the file browser to do the deletion so that you kind of have an idea of what command is going to work, but we need to look at these commands and see which ones will work. rm models, will that work? Why not? Models is a directory. RM needs a tac-r option to remove directories. That's not going to work. Config models, again, it's not going to work because one, this isn't the relative path to the directory that I want to delete, and I don't have the tac-r option. So I know it's going to be an rm tac-r. Rm tac-r models is the one that I want, and then this config / models, that's not going to work because there isn't a directory named configs in the config directory. If I had a .. in front of it, then it would work. All right, so that's it. There's the 6 questions for the homework set. It looks like all of my answers have been saved, so I'm going to do save and submit. Make sure that I want to do this. All right, now I've got this set up so that you can take it 3 times. So if you get kicked out and it automatically submits your quiz for you, then you can retake it. Now, I would not suggest retaking it just for the sake of trying to get a better grade, because there may be times where I don't put the correct answers in Blackboard. I just need to get the quiz posted before I actually have them all worked out, or something goes wrong where Blackboard is actually grading it incorrectly. So if you think that you haven't gotten 100, you go back, change your answers to get 100, and then I go and fix the quiz to be correct, and your score goes down. That's the score you're going to be stuck with. Okay. But if you get kicked off, you need to retake it. You get up to 3 trials. It should also be set up so that you can leave and come back. So if you closed your browser, you should be able to log back in and get into this quiz in the time frame that you have. Right? So there should be, hopefully there aren't going to be any technical issues with doing these quizzes. All right, so I click OK here. So that's the first thing that I need to do to complete the homework. I need to do the quiz. So the next thing that I need to do for the homework is upload my tarball. And so I've got homework upload 0. So I'm going to click on that link, and it's basically going to give me a way to attach a file, and that's what I want to do. I want to attach a file. So if you remember when we did the homework, this is my homework directory. I did the homework in the directory, then I copied or moved the homework directory to include my username for this class, not whatever your actual username is on your computer, right? Your first initial, your last name. Then I created a tarball from that directory that just includes that directory. And now I'm going to upload this tarball. That's the only thing that needs to upload.
And how do we rename again?
The move command. So you move it from what it is to what you want it to be. All right, so I go in here, it tells me how many points are possible. I don't need to write a submission. All I need to do is browse my computer for this tarball. So now I do need a file browser. So I do need to know that all of these files that we're creating at the command line, I mean, they correspond to files that are in some directory on my system. In my user, or in my home directory, my user's home directory, that's where my homework directory is. So it's right here. And then here's the file that I want to upload. All right, so I upload this file. Any comments, you know, however clever you want to be when you submit your homework. I rarely read these, so click submit. It's going to upload it, and now it has been submitted. You can also submit this up to 3 times. If you realize that you didn't complete something, or you talk to somebody and realize you did it wrong, you can upload another version. The last one that gets uploaded is going to be the one that gets graded. This naming convention, this is not optional, right? If you don't have this naming convention, you're going to get a 0, because I'm going to grade these with a script, and if your naming convention breaks my script, you're going to take a 0 on it, right? So make sure this is right. Yeah, spell your name right, put the homework number in there. I mean, you know, I don't know how much flexibility I'm going to have, but let's just assume it's 0 flexibility initially. Right, especially you can't put in like a directory that's just named homework 00, because when I download everybody's homework and I unpack them all, if everybody's homework is named homework 00, they all start overriding each other, right? And I have no way of telling which one is which, right? So if you don't want your homework to get overwritten by Derek's, for example, then make sure you put your username in there so that that doesn't happen. All right, so that's how we do the homework. That would be it.
I'm just going to start submitting some work under Joey's name.
Yes, submit all your stuff under. That's right. Although when I download it from Blackboard, it gets tagged with your Blackboard username. So
So now I just need Joey's Blackboard.
What's that? I don't know.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that I'm going to automate this process, and essentially what I will have is a script that unpacks your tarball, goes in there, and then starts checking things like, okay, the move or the models directory should have been deleted. That means if it exists, you didn't do the homework right, okay? So I have a check. If the models directory exists, then you've failed my first check, right? So you don't get all of those points. So if I've got 10 checks and 8 of those pass, you're going to get an 8 out of 10, but it's always going to be worth 20 points. So you're going to get 80% of 20 points, right? And hopefully, I'm not sure if I'll actually be able to do this, but I'm going to post scripts that would do the homework for you so that you could see how the homework could be done. And then I'm hoping that I'll be able to post like the output of my grader script so that you can see, oh yeah, this test failed, and that failed because I didn't actually name the directory correctly. I named it incorrectly, something like that, right? All right, so that's how we complete homework. Now everybody has seen that done. We all know exactly what to expect and what's going to happen. So today I'm going to finish up. Well, I've got a homework assignment that's posted, and this is material that you're going to find useful on that homework assignment. And then next week we're going to start looking at manipulating text in text files. And so we'll have a sort of a new module that we start next week. So I want to finish up the material for this week's homework assignment. I want to talk about globs or wildcards. Those two they basically mean the same thing. So globs is a word that's used sometimes to mean shell wildcards. And then I want to talk about expansion. as well. So these are shell features. If you're interested, the shell that we're using is called bash. That's pretty much the standard shell that's installed on Linux machines. And so bash is a shell that provides some useful features. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of using like the command prompt on a Windows machine, but it's much less feature rich. I mean, I think it's because they don't really care. That's not what your primary interaction with the computer is supposed to be. But bash is written to be convenient, right? It's like, wow, if you're working on the command line, here's a whole list of things that would be useful. One of them is tab completion. That's the shell, right? So when you hit tab and it completes stuff for you, that's the shell doing it. And so another really useful feature that's provided by the shell is what's called a wildcard. And so the most common wildcard is this star. If you put star in a command line argument, and there's a file that matches that pattern, star basically means anything, then the shell will automatically grab those files or those arguments and it'll put them in the command line for you. So star matches anything 0 or more times. So here's a couple of examples. If I did an rm star.txt, this is going to match all files that end with .txt in the current directory, right? So if I had 1,000 text files in the current directory, this one command would delete all of those text files. What's really nice is that this pattern allows you to delete some but not all of those text files, right? Let's say I had 1,000 files that were .txt, 1,000 of them that were .mp3, and 1,000 of them that were .bin. Well, if I was going through the file browser, I'd have to do some clever sorting or do the old control click, 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 right? But I can just remove all of them immediately. Now, this is also where you're going to shoot yourself in the foot because rm star removes everything. Right? And everybody's going to have a situation at least one time in their life where they rm star their directory that they didn't mean to. And hopefully you're not working on your dissertation when that happens, right? Didn't you do that, Gavin? So Gavin rm starred his dissertation when he was in grad school. Luckily he had it backed up and was able to get some back. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, this still gets you. rm data tac star.txt would remove everything that begins with data and ends with .txt. So really that star just means, yeah, if there's anything that matches this, the beginning starts with this and the end starts or ends with this, match those. And then it also works for directories. So let's say that you've got a bunch of directories that contain files that all end with .log, right? That'd be like log files. Well, you can delete all of those log files without going into every one of those directories using this wild pattern. So this is saying star/star.log. The slash means that any directory that's in this current directory. So then I do /star.log. So if there are any files that end with .log in any of the directories that are in the current directory, this will expand to those, and you could remove all of those at one time. Sometimes you don't want 0 or more. So a question mark will match anything. Actually, I don't think it is 0 or 1 time. I think it's 1 time. So a question mark basically will match 1 character, right? If you know that it needs to be data tag 0 and then something like a number or a letter, then you could use the question mark instead of the star to delete that. So this case would match data text 01.txt, but not 011.txt. Yes, Corey?
So just a confirmation, following you correctly. The rm star, you have to be in a certain directory to delete, like those text files will be in just 1 directory.
Yeah, so like just star by itself would expand to all of the files and directories that are in your current directory. Yeah.
And so that question mark, if you put data tag question mark dot text,
Then that
it
should,
would remove everything from 00 to 999. Right?
yes, yeah, or AB or AA or anything that had two characters in there.
So you can use them some sequence.
Yeah, exactly. And so I rarely find a need for the question mark, but sometimes it is the thing that you need because this star is called the glob. That's why these are called globs. Sometimes the glob character is it just expands to too much, and you don't want to include some of those files that the glob would include. And then the other thing that's very useful. So these wildcards require something to be in the directory. They match stuff that's in the directory, right? And if nothing is in the directory that matches it, it actually just takes the string. Like if there were no .txt files here, then the shell would actually pass star.txt to the remove command. And then the remove command would most likely complain that that file doesn't exist, right? Because star can be in the file name. So these all require there to actually be files that get matched. And this is handled by the shell, so you don't need support for this by any specific command, right? The remove command doesn't have to support the wildcard. The shell creates the list of arguments that it's going to give to the remove command and then gives it to the remove command as if you had typed it all in. So this is available for all commands. And then the other thing that the shell does that's nice is it'll do expansion. And the expansion does not require there to be files that match. The expansion is a shorthand for creating multiple arguments that all follow a certain pattern. So for example, I've got file, tac, and then in the curly brackets, that's the thing that's going to get expand, a list of things that are separated by commas. And what the shell will do is take the beginning and the end and then replace the middle with every entry in that list that you give by commas. So file tac1 with the curly brackets x comma y is going to expand into a file tac x and a file tac y. And so this is a really nice one if you need to create a bunch of files real quick, like you need to create data tac 0, 1 through 9, right? You could just type in the curly brackets and do 1, 2, 3, 4, and that expands, is expanded by the shell. It doesn't require there to be any files that match that name. So if you needed to create a bunch of directories, right? So make dir 0 and then expand 1, 2, and 3. It's going to create 3 different directories as if you typed all of that into the command line yourself. So those are shell provided by the shell. So I think I've got a demo for doing some wildcard expansion stuff. So if you haven't done it, let's download the sandbox. Should be posted on the website. Let's see here. Today, and if you downloaded this before class, more than 2 minutes before class, you might want to re-download it because I think I just pushed a new one up here. So here's today's sandbox, 170127. Oh, yes. All right, give me 1 second here. Resume recording. If I give more than one, it lists the contents of all of those directories. So if I keep going up, I keep seeing, you know, day 7, day 6. And if I go to the very top, actually I ran out of room. It doesn't look like my shell has all, or my terminal has all of the lines stored. Does it? Oh yeah, it does. Here we go. So at the very top are those files, the regular files that are day 15 log. So those get listed first, and then what comes behind it is the listing of all of those directories. So that's very handy. This in particular, I mean, this part right here isn't necessarily handy because it's got so much information on it. So let's just list out the files. When I did day star, that listed the contents of all of those directories. If I just list out the files, I put a .log at the end. Now I just get a listing of all of the files. If I just wanted to list the contents of the directories and not these files, then I could put a slash at the end, and that would actually only list out the contents of the directories. So this would be a wildcard that only matches directories. It won't match the file names. So if I go back up, look through the things that just listed, day 10 all the way up to day, there's day 10 again. So here's me just listing out the files that end with .log, and then here's me listing out just the directories that start with day. So there are no files that are listed right after that command. So I was able to limit what got listed. Actually, I'm limiting what the shell expands before it hands off the argument list to the ls command. So there's just various things that you can do to sort of whittle down the groups of things that are going to be put in here for you. Going to be put into the command line for you. Now, I don't think I've used the echo command. Echo is a command that just takes whatever you give it as arguments and it prints it to the screen. Right? It just echoes whatever you tell it. Now, it's going to be a little bit before we realize what the usefulness of this command is, but this is a useful command. But right now, all I care about is that if I give it arguments, it will echo those to the screen. Right? Whereas ls, if I give it arguments, it will list the files and directories. So if I give the echo command day star, I'm actually going to get a list of what the shell creates before it hands it to the ls command. So this is literally what it looks to the ls command that I've typed in whenever I use day star. Right? This is what the shell is creating. And so the echo command allows you to just see exactly what the expansion is going to be. So it's got, you know, day 15 log, and then if I keep going, I've got some directory names in here, I believe. Day star, where's the, yeah, right here, right? Day 9, that's a directory. So that gets fed into the ls command as if it was typed in at the command line. So this is the echo command is useful for seeing what the thing is going to expand to before you run it. So for example, if you're not sure that the pattern that you're trying to use to delete some files is going to delete stuff that you don't want it to delete, you can use echo to figure out what the expansion is going to be before you actually do it, right? If you want to just want to be safe. So the same thing, if I limit the pattern, I put a .log on the end, it only shows the stuff that are the .log files. And again, I keep saying this, but this is because it explains the behavior of what's going on. The shell expands the wildcard pattern before it goes to the command. And every time you do that, the shell is going to expand it. So if I do star.txt, star.txt, I'm going to get a duplicate list of all of the text files, because every time the shell runs into something that is a pattern, it's going to replace it with whatever that pattern matches. Right? So I can duplicate the files, the file names. So this is listing all of the .txt files, but it's doing it twice. Right? And that's because the shell expands every pattern that it runs into. Yes, Corey?
To get them in like the list form.
Yeah, you do. You pass that to ls-tac-l, right? So if you do that expansion and then you pass it and then you use ls-tac-l instead, then it will be in sort of one on top of the other. There would be other ways to get it into a vertical list, but we're not ways that we know how to do yet. But we will eventually. We'll figure that out. So here's an example of, let's do all of the txt files, then all of the log files, and then all of the txt files again. So I'm going to get a list where the .txt files are duplicated, but in between all of them are a bunch of .log files. And so if I look at the top of this list, here's .txt. The bottom of this list, here's .txt. Are there any log files in here? Yes, right here. Okay, so here's the top of this list, and here's the bottom of that list, and then here's the middle. So txt, log, txt. So here'd be a long listing of just the files, right? That's typically, this will get you, will do what you want almost all of the time, right? Every once in a while, this won't quite do what you want. But if you want to see them in vertical, sort of listed out. So let's try this. And again, I'm hoping, I don't know if I've tested this, but the question marks match a single character. So if I wanted to list out the same files that I just listed out using a question mark, I'd have to use two. Actually, no, there's more. So if I do a listing of day star log, you can see that I've got some files that have 3 numbers in their name, and I've got some files that only have 2 numbers in their name. And when I use the 2 question marks, I only get a listing of the ones that have the 2 numbers in their name. So those question marks match a single character. So it can be any character, but it has to be one character that's there. So if I wanted to match the ones that had all 3, right, I'd put 3 question marks. So this would be a way for me to do operations like if I, let's say I change, this is common with me. Let's say I change my naming convention because I end up running into cases where I have like files that needed to be named like 130, and I want them all to be 0 padded. So it's like, oh, I used to use, just 2 numbers in the file name. Now I need 3 numbers in the file name. This would be a way for me to only delete the old stuff and not delete the new stuff, right? Use the question marks to only delete the stuff that had 2 numbers in the name. Some of these, which this is going to match all of them, right? These ones that have 3 numbers in the file name, they all start with a 0. So I can specify, like if I had some 1s in there, like day 130, I could specify if I wanted it to be the 1s or the 0s that get listed here. Now I'm using ls just as a way to show the files, but we could be doing rm as well, right? If we did rm, it would remove these files. Like any command that takes arguments, we could pass these wildcards to that command. And then we've already saw that the day, there's a bunch of directories that are called day something, a number. And then those directories contain a bunch of files. And so here's a way for me to list out just the .txt files, actually just the files that end with txt that are in all of the day directories, right? And I need to put this slash here because otherwise it's not gonna, it won't interpret it as being a wildcard on a directory name. And so here is the .txt files in day 10. Here's the .txt files in day 9, right? So it's a listing of all of the files that end with .txt that are in a subdirectory that starts with day. So this would be a way for me to quickly delete all of those files. If I knew for some reason that I wanted to delete all of those files, I wouldn't have to go into every directory and run an rm_.txt command. I could just delete them directly from here. And again, I can give the this expansion, this glob character more than once. So this is going to match, again, all of the directories, subdirectories that start with day, but then I only want the txt files that begin with temp. So that should give me stuff like this, right? So that's day 10, temp tac 00. It should list that, but it shouldn't list trial. And so now I have just a listing of the txt files that start with the name temp, but are in a directory that starts with the word day. The patterns don't have to, they don't have to be in consecutive directories, right? So this would be, all right, all the day subdirectories. There's a subdirectory in those called temp, and I want to list everything that's in those temp directories. The nice thing about this is if one of these directories, like let's say day 9, didn't actually have a directory called temp in it, but day 10 did, this would match the stuff in day 10, right? I don't have to have a temp directory in all of the things that match this first pattern. The shell is going to figure out which files I mean, and then it's going to put those in there. I don't know exactly how it's implemented, but you can think of it as the shell goes and looks at every file that exists, compares it to the pattern that you've typed, and if it matches, throws it in the list, and then says, okay, here's the list of things that match what you're looking for. So I've got stuff that's in this temp directory. All right, so let's start deleting stuff. Let's remove all of the log files, but let's not remove the directories, right? So there's directories called day 05, day 09. Let's say that they've got stuff in there that we need, but we don't need the log files. So I'm going to delete all of those. I'm going to look at, there's a directory inside of day 5 that's called old. Let's see what's in there, right? So it's got some files that are text files and some of them that are bin files. And let's say that I want to take those text files and I want to move them into their own directory. Maybe I'm going to tar up these text files and then I'm going to send them to somebody. Like I'm going to send them to Joey over Hex Chat or something like that, right? Whatever it is that we're doing that day. So I'm going to create this directory. And now what I want to do is I want to move all of those text files that were in the old directory, that were in the day 5 directory. I want to move them into this new directory that I just created without moving into one directory or the other. All right, so I'm going to do a move command that has a pattern that matches the files that I want. And then I'm going to give the name of the directory that I want to move them to. And if I list out the contents of the old subdirectory that is in the day 5 directory, I now see that there are no text files in there anymore. It's like only bin files. Let me make a directory for the new text files. So there's also a subdirectory in there that's called new. So I'm going to make a directory to move all of those into. And this time I'm going to go into that directory first. Okay, so I'm going to go into the directory that I want to copy stuff to. And I'm going to use the relative path name to the files that I want, but that path name is going to be a pattern, so it's going to match the things for me. And so I've got // to go up one directory, and I've got day 5 to go into that day 5 directory. Oh, looks like I've got a typo here. And then I've got old star.txt. And it is complaining. So if you replace that old with new, it's going to complain as well. And the reason is that if you give the move command more than 2 arguments, the last one has to be a directory, right? It does not make sense to give 2 files that you want to move to a single file. So it's going to complain if the last argument isn't a directory. So this is a case where I need this // to reference the current directory, right? If I'm trying to move stuff into this directory, then I need a way to reference the directory that I'm in. And the way that I do that is with dot, right? So I have to give dot as the last command here. Now this, I think I've already deleted all of these, so I've got a mistake here. This should be new, right? Instead of old, it should be new because there are text files in that new directory. But I have to give it dot at the end so that it'll move that stuff into the current working directory. All right, I'm going to go back up to the top. Well, not the very top. I'm going to go back up a directory. And I'm going to look at some of the other, some of the things that can cause problems with patterns, or some of the things that you'll run into with patterns. So here's just a listing of all files that end with bin that are in any directory that is in any subdirectory named day. And then I can, of course, limit that, right? If I've got directories that have more than 2 numbers in there, I can limit it to just the ones that have 2 numbers in it by mixing the question mark and the glob. So I can use the question mark and the star together to build more complicated patterns that really just match the files that I want it to match. Gives me the same listing in this case. I could put a 0 in here and a question mark. And so that's going to be slightly different than what I've got now, because this directory here that is day 10, that's not going to be included in this pattern. So this would be only single digit days. All right, so now I see that that day 10 is gone. And then let's just remove all of those files. So look at all the files that we're going to remove with this one command. So this is going to be all files that are in directories that start with day 0, and then they have to be in a subdirectory. So anything that's in this day, like day 09, for example, those files are not going to be deleted. They have to be in a subdirectory of that file, and then they also have to end with .bin. So this is going to delete all of these files that we just listed. Now, if I list everything again, I didn't delete all of them because remember, I limited it with this question mark. So now the only ones that exist are the ones that were in this day 10. So all of the bin files that were in the day 10 subdirectory, those are all still there because I narrowed the scope of my pattern. Now I'm just going to remove all of them, right? And there's some of them that are in there now, right? This will be the day 10 ones. And I get nothing. Now here is a error that's going to come up that can be confusing, and the explanation for this is, again, the shell takes your pattern, expands it into the files that match it. If it doesn't match anything, it just hands off the pattern as is. And so I get an error here that says ls cannot access day star 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 bin, no such file or directory. Now, it would be more useful to me, or it would make more sense to me if I was told that there are no files that match this pattern, right? But that's not what happens. The shell doesn't check to see if, it doesn't care if the pattern you gave it matches files or not, because perhaps you actually gave it the name of a file that you wanted to move or delete or list. So the ls command gets this as a string, and then when it tries to list the contents of that as a directory, it fails. And so you're getting an error message from ls, even though what happened was the pattern that you thought was going to match something did not get matched by the shell, right? So your error message is going to come from the command. And if I just echo this pattern, then I get exactly what the shell is going to expand into, and I see that it's got those stars in there. And you can name files star.bin. I have no idea why you would. It would cause a lot of trouble, right? But you could name them star.bin, and then this would be this could be a valid name, right? It'd be a pain to work with, but that's why it doesn't make any assumptions. All right, so that's wildcard globbing. And the homework assignment that we have for the one that's called homework 1 is going to require you to use those to do the, well, you're not gonna have to use them. You're either gonna have to type out the 1,000 files that you need to delete, or you're gonna have to learn how to use the wildcard pattern to delete stuff.
It takes 3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, we call that one at a time in it. And yeah, we always found that the new lieutenants were good at one at a time in it. If you needed something done, one at a time, put a new lieutenant on it. All right, let's see. I don't want to cover this. What else do I got here? I think I've got something. No, I have another demo though. One thing I want to mention is spaces in file names. So it's possible to put spaces in file names. The reason you don't want to do it is because it has to be handled specially on the command line. How does the shell know what the command name is and then all of the arguments? Well, it breaks it up by spaces. Well, if one of your arguments actually contains a space, then the shell has no way of knowing that that needs to be a single argument unless you explicitly tell it. And so if you have file names or spaces in file names, which in the homework there are plenty of examples where we'll have to deal with this, then there's 2 things that you can do. So I'm going to go back into my sandboxes directory. Yeah, I've got a directory called spaces, so I'm going to go in there and let's look at the contents. All right, so I've got files that contain spaces in their name. Data 01, file 1, and then log files. These are common. These would be, you know, the types of names that you would use to name some things, okay? So the problem is, for example, let's say I try to list the contents of that log files directory. It says, I get 2 error messages, right? I get an error message that says cannot access log and another one that says cannot access files. Again, it'd be nice if it just said, hey, log files is one directory, you know, escape that space. But I might have a directory called log and a directory called files, and LS isn't going to make any assumptions about what I want it to do. It's just going to do what I tell it to do. So there's 2 things I can do. One is I can quote this directory name, which means I put quotations around the directory name. Anything that's in quotations will be taken as a single argument. So if I pass that to LS, it gives me the expansion, or it gives me the listing of what's in there. The other thing that I can do is I can escape that space. And this is not just spaces. This is with all kinds of special characters. But when I say escape something, you put a backslash in front of it, and that tells the shell that, hey, there's a space that's coming up, but you need to include that as part of this argument so that it gets passed as a single argument to the ls command. And so I can do that. If you do tab completion, you're going to get these slashes that are put in there automatically for you. So just know that those slashes are to escape that space, right? Yeah.
You'd be able to use that with the globs earlier. You said that those.
Yeah. So globs sort of make it a little bit easier because you can use a glob and that will match spaces, right? So you can put a glob in there.
No, that's not what I was asking. You said that somebody could use a star, like when the glob's in a file name, like out of log glob files. Would you be able to use backslash to have it not read that glob as anything?
Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly.
Just as
yeah. So like, let's say that you had a file that had the glob character in it. Then what Derek is asking is, could you escape that glob character at the command line so that the shell didn't try to expand it into a bunch of different file names? And yes, you could. So if you escape it, then the shell will hand it to the command as it is. So here's, if I want to remove this file, like I want to remove this first file, I got to escape that space, right? Tab completion will do this a lot for me. Like if you typed in rm file tab, it would probably escape that space for you because this is the only, it knows that the next character has to be a space. And so I've deleted that the first file, I think, did I? Oh, it was a bin file, not the txt file. So I deleted the file1.bin. This would be deleting both of the files that are file 2. And so now both of those file 2s are gone. And then I've got all of these files up here called data space 1 through 8. The glob will match the space. So this actually will delete all of those files for me. So a lot of times if you've got a bunch of files that have spaces in them that you just want to delete, you can use a glob character instead of having to hassle with trying to escape them. Let's see here. I'm going to try to list the contents of log files without escaping the space by giving it a wildcard that says everything that is a directory that starts with log, list the contents of that. So this gets me away from having to quote log files or having to escape that space. And then I can delete everything that's in the log directory using a glob pattern again, right? So that's going to remove everything that's in there. And then I can remove that directory itself using the glob pattern, right? So a lot of times, if you're just trying to rename them or get rid of the files that have spaces in their names, the glob pattern is useful. All right, and so that's all I have for today. So there's a homework assignment that's posted, homework number 1. The PDF is right here. The tarball is already posted. And then next week, we're going to start talking about working with text files and manipulating text at the command line.
That's due Friday, right?
That'll be due Friday, yep.